Peace, peace, peace. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those of you who don't know, it's your boy Vic Slant Hope. And I got another video for y'all. Today we're going to be covering law number 18 from the 48 Laws of Power. And this one is, do not build fortresses to protect yourself. Isolation is dangerous. The judgment says, the world is dangerous and enemies are everywhere. Everyone has to protect himself. A fortress seems the safest, but isolation exposes you to more dangers than it protects you from. It cuts you off from valuable information. It makes you conspicuous and an easy target. Better to circulate amongst people, find allies, mingle. You are shielded from your enemies by the crowd. Now, I could give y'all two examples. One, how this applies to everybody else, like, regular people like me and you. It also mainly applies to like rulers, kings, and presidents, and so forth, right? So I'm gonna give you the example that applies to us first, right? For example, the world is dangerous, right? It says you have a lot of enemies everywhere. So to isolate yourself, to build a fortress, to isolate yourself, to remove yourself, it's one thing to remove yourself from a situation, but to not talk to people, to not keep your ear to the streets, that is very dangerous, right? Because for example, if you got some type of power, you could be running an organization, right? Even if you're a boss, if you got a business, when you tend to not come around your business like that, let's say you own a business and you let somebody else run it. If you're the boss and you don't come around like that, people get to slack. People get to, sometimes people might even start stealing your money and you don't even know because you're not really paying attention, right? If you're not tending to your business, you notice that when the boss come around, people tend to like straighten up, they tend to act right, they tend to like really do their job. But if you're not around and if you're not keeping your ears in the streets, if you don't got like a little spy that's working for you or doing certain things, then this becomes very dangerous for you. The same thing happens in the streets. When you running around in the drug gang, when you gang banging and you doing certain things, or maybe if you're a person like me that stopped being in the streets, it's always important to have an ear to the streets to know what your enemies are conspiring about. Because if you don't have no ear to the streets, if you don't have no ties, if you don't know what's going on, if you don't know what your enemy's doing, if you're not keeping tabs on people, then you are in danger of an attack and you might not even know it. You understand what I'm saying? But when you keep your ears to the streets, and that just goes for anything. For example, if you was going to go to a club and you heard that the club got shot up, right? How did you hear about it? Because you're keeping your ear to the streets. If you heard they were shooting over there, if you hear there was a problem over there, if you hear, yo, this dude snitch, they looking for him. You kind of like to stay away from this dude. You kind of like to stay away from that area. You got to keep your ears to the streets. But if you isolate yourself and you close the doors in, it could be very dangerous. Another example of do not build fortress to protect yourself. That's like, I'm gonna give you an example. That's like being your home, right? Let's say your home is very well fortified, but the moment somebody knows where you live, it creates a problem for you. As long as you're inside, you might be good, but you're gonna need food, you're gonna need some materials, you're gonna need a whole bunch of things, right? So at the end of the day, and I'm talking about like if you apply this as like a fortress, I can starve you. The moment I know where you at, the moment I know where your fortress is at, where you're hiding, I can besiege it, right? And I could make your house basically become into a prison, right? If I know where you live, if I know where you at, if I know where your fortress is at. That's why it's important to be able to be out and like it says right here, right? It says circulate amongst people, find allies, mingle. So to the point where it's like you always gotta have people that you mingle with. You always, that's why I always say you always gotta chill with you always gotta have wolves on deck. You can never really fully remove yourself. At least that's just how I roll. You can never really fully remove yourself from certain situations or just talking to people in general, because you always gotta keep tabs just to see what's going on, and this is how you protect yourself. Now, how does that? This usually applies, like I said, to kings and queens, because when they ruling over a bunch of people and you isolate yourself, a lot of times people try to knock you off power, right? They trying to take over with the military or by the citizens. They always trying to take people. You always gonna have enemies of some sort. Always, it never fails. So when you have this type of power and you can't listen to what the people are saying or what they're doing, if you're not keeping tabs, then you might not see a rebellion coming. You might not see certain things coming. So this is why, if you notice, presidents, I think the president's always going out to kiss babies and shit. They always going out to be diplomatic. They always going to shake some other leader's hand. They always trying to build ties with other countries. They always trying to build with the people. When there was a massacre recently, Joe Biden went out there, just to pay his respects and do certain things. They do that because they're not trying to isolate themselves. Isolation is dangerous. The people need to see you sometimes. The people need to see you come around. And I'm gonna give y'all this story. For example, in the hood, when I was part of a gang, like the person who started the gang, he stopped coming around. You know what I'm saying? Like, he stopped coming around. We stopped seeing him. Nobody really, only certain people spoke to him. So he kind of like isolated himself to a certain extent. He probably still had people that talked to him, but he isolated himself. And because he isolated himself, I used to constantly hear other OGs, I guess I was under him, conspiring, plotting on him, right? Like plotting to knock him off and take the power. Or saying shit like, oh, he ain't tough, he ain't in the hood, he ain't doing this. So when you're not around to really hear those things, when you isolate yourself, now you got people talking about taking your spot. You got people plotting on you. You got people talking about taking you out. And this is another reason, another example why this gang shit ain't it. Because you had other gang members trying to take out the head OG, right? You can't trust these mother lovers, man. So that's just the point of how isolation is dangerous. Now the reversal of this is this, that although isolating yourself could be bad, there's certain moments where isolation could be good. And that's in the instance if sometimes you got to retreat. Sometimes you got to take yourself away from people to be able to think, to be able to organize, to be able to strategize. But this is a temporarily isolation. For example, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he received revelation, he was isolated in a cave, right? Malcolm X, for example, when he went to prison and he was isolated, he needed that in order to become this great man that he became, right? When you think of Moses too, he was isolated. He went to the mountains, right? Jesus, he was isolated. Even though that he was around his disciples, he removed himself from his disciples to be able to pray and just do certain things, right? So isolation is not necessarily all bad. Sometimes it's needed to be able to have a clear mind. But however, you still need to come back from that isolation. Permanent isolation is a problem. So remember, you always got to keep your ears to the streets, and you always got to be one step ahead of what people are plotting or what they thinking or what slick shit they saying behind your back. So let me know what y'all thoughts are on this video. If y'all like the content, like, comment, subscribe, share. Stay blessed. Peace.